rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Hi, I'm Irvin Baxter, and I'd like to welcome you to a special edition of End of the Age. Today, we are going to show you a portion of one of our latest teachings, Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon. On December the 6th of 2017, President Trump announced the United States was recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and would be moving its embassy to Jerusalem. This immediately set off a firestorm of negative reaction from the UN, from Europe, from the Arab world, and mostly from the Palestinians. In Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon, we focused on the critical question, why did President Trump do it? And where will this action lead? This is an exciting lesson, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Let's get started with Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon. The goal of this lesson today is, number one, explain how we've reached the present situation. Two, disclose President Trump's efforts toward peace so far. Three, describe where we are right now. And four, reveal what the prophecies say will happen. God made a covenant with a man by the name of Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, verse number 18. Listen to it. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt in the south unto the great river, the river Euphrates in the north. Now, this promise by God that Abraham and his descendants after him would have this land from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates, the area called the Promised Land, is the world's number one dispute today, 4,000 years later. When God made this statement, Abraham was in Beersheba, a town about 50 miles south of Jerusalem. So God promised this area we call the Promised Land to Abraham. And yet here we are 4,000 years later, and it's the number one dispute in world politics today. Well, 600 years after this, led by Joshua, Israel entered the Promised Land around 1400 BC. Then, 400 years after that, King David moved Israel's capital from Hebron to Jerusalem. That happened around 1000 BC. King David's son, King Solomon, built Israel's first temple on the Temple Mount in 968 BC. This began what now is known as the First Temple Era. The First Temple Era extended from 968 BC until 586 BC. Judah, by that time, had gone into idolatry. They had gone into all kinds of ungodliness. Because of this, God sent Jeremiah the prophet to tell them, because of your iniquity, you're going to be carried away into captivity, into Babylon. I have to do this to strip you down to the bare so I can start all over again with you, because I want to restore you to where you should be. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came, carried the children of Israel away, the people of Judah away, and that began 70 years of exile. This 70 years of exile, specifically prophesied by Jeremiah the prophet, continued from 606 BC until 536 BC. The first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC. Then in 538 BC, God raised up a Persian king who had overthrown the kingdom of Babylon and began the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. This Persian king's name was Cyrus. Cyrus was prophesied before he was ever born in Isaiah chapter 44 and 45. The prophecy stated that he would be anointed to build the temple of God. So, Cyrus gave the order in 538 BC. The second temple was finally completed by Zerubbabel in 516 BC. This began the Second Temple era, which extended from 516 BC until 70 AD. Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon, a tremendous lesson from End Time Ministries. On December the 6th, 2017, President Donald Trump announced the United States was recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and would be moving its embassy to Jerusalem. This immediately set off a firestorm of negative reaction from the UN, from Europe, from the Arab world, and mostly from the Palestinians. Now for the critical questions. Why did he do it? Was this an impulsive action, or was this the result of careful, well thought out calculation? And finally, where will this action lead? In Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon, we'll answer these critical questions and disclose what the prophecies say will ultimately happen. Get your copy of Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon today. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or go to endtime.com.
Turn your scriptures from black and white into color. Experience the footsteps of Jesus. Understand Bible prophecy that is coming to pass right now. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter and the End Time team this spring 2018 for a life-changing trip to Israel and Jordan. Mark your calendar for April 26th through May 11th for this amazing journey. Call 1-800-END-TIME, that's 1-800-363-8463 and press 2, or go to endtime.com/Israel-tour to receive your information today.
Do you believe we're living in the end times? If so, what's the one magazine you should subscribe to? End Time is the magazine designed to guide you through the end times. Irvin highly recommends End Time magazine so you can stay informed with what's going on in the news and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Call 1-800-363-8463 and get End Time magazine for 2 years for only $29. Call 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com to take advantage of this special offer.
Today, we are viewing a portion of one of our latest teachings, Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon. Remember, we are focusing on why President Trump announced America's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and where this action will ultimately lead. Let's continue with today's lesson, Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon. On May the 26th of 1967, Nasser made a speech, and in this speech, he blatantly revealed what he planned to do. Here's what he said. Taking over Sharm el-Sheikh meant confrontation with Israel, and also meant that we were ready to enter a general war with Israel. The battle will be a general one, and our basic objective will be to destroy Israel. So now Nasser has put his cards on the table. He's ordered out the UN troops. He's blockaded the Straits of Tiran. And now he makes this speech that his object is to destroy Israel. He had signed this military alliance with Hussein of Jordan, with Assad of Syria, and now he makes the speech, we are going to destroy Israel. Well, Israel is observing all this and realized that war is unavoidable. Consequently, rather than sitting as a sitting duck and just allowing all the Arab countries around it to attack, Israel decided that it would take the initiative. On June the 5th of 1967, Israeli planes left Israel, flying low over the waters of the Mediterranean. They flew 500 feet above land, and then they swept into Egypt. They caught Egypt by surprise and destroyed 90% of the Egyptian Air Force, while it never was able to get its planes off the ground. Now, Nasser called King Hussein of Jordan and said, "Jump into the war and help us. We're 1 hour south of Tel Aviv." Of course, he was lying. King Hussein was sent a message by the Prime Minister of Israel saying, "We have nothing against you. If you'll stay out of this war, we will not bother you. But if you attack us, we're going to counterattack with all of our might." Well, Jordan, King Hussein, did not feel like he could stay out of the battle while his Arab brethren were fighting against the hated Zionist entity. So Jordan attacked Israel. Israel counterattacked, driving Jordan out of East Jerusalem and all the way back across the Jordan River from which he had come 19 years before. Israel also, during this war, decided to capture the Golan Heights in the north from Syria. Why? Because Syria had used the height advantage to lob shells down on the villages of northern Israel and had been doing this all over during the last 19 years. Israel felt like they had to put a stop to it. So they attacked the Golan Heights. They drove Syria out of the Golan and took total control of the high ground, putting Israel in a much safer strategic position. Now you can see when the dust cleared. Now remember, all this happened in 6 days. It was the 1967 6 Days War. It was astounding that little Israel could totally defeat, totally rout Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, all in this war. So when the war stopped, a new map had been created. Now Israel controlled the West Bank, the area biblically called Judea and Samaria. Israel also had taken control of the Golan Heights in the north, plus had swept all the way to the Suez Canal in the south. Israel stood as the preeminent military power of the Middle East. The world was amazed, and also the world knew God must be with Israel. When finally on June the 7th, Israel took possession of the Temple Mount, the word went out to the world: the Temple Mount is in our hands. There was a chaplain with the Israeli forces at that time. His name was Rabbi Goren. And Rabbi Goren knew this was the redemption of Israel. So when the Jewish soldiers, led by General Uzi, went up onto the Temple Mount, Rabbi Goren had come prepared. In his knapsack were 2 large bundles of dynamite. He handed them to General Uzi and said, "Here's dynamite. Blow up these heathen worship sites." He's talking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock. I mean, the Arabs had come in and they had built their Muslim shrines in the places where originally the first and second temple had stood. Rabbi Goren said, "They've got to go, blow them up." General Uzi said, "Rabbi, be quiet." And then Rabbi Goren insisted and said, "No, you must do it now. You will go down in history if you will do it." General Uzi said, "Rabbi, be quiet, or I'm taking you to jail." Rabbi Goren bowed his head and walked away sadly. He knew something terrible had just taken place. So why was he so sure? Well, God told Israel what to do when they were brought into the promised land. It's found in Numbers chapter 33, verse 51 through 53. Listen to it. "Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, when you are passed over Jordan into Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you and destroy all their pictures and destroy all their molten images and quite pluck down all their high places. The Temple Mount was a high place. And you shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell therein, for I have given you the land to possess it. Let's pause there just a moment. Go back 4,000 years. God told Abraham, Genesis chapter 15, verse 18, this land is to be yours and your descendants after you forever. So when I bring you back here, you are to utterly drive out the inhabitants of the land. I've given it to you to possess it. So you are to destroy their images, their idols, you destroy their pictures, and any places of worship they have built on the high places. Purge the promised land of those places. And then in Numbers 33:55, God gave further instructions, telling the children of Israel, but if you will not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come to pass that those which you let remain of them shall be pricks in your eyes, thorns in your sides, and they shall vex you in the land wherein you dwell. This was the penalty for disobedience. God warned them. And remember, when Shlomo Goren said, you've got to do this now, he was simply urging General Uzi to do what God told him to do. Well, he didn't do it, and guess what? It's been pricks in the eyes, thorns on the sides, and they have vexed the people of Israel ever since 1967. It should not have happened that way, but it did. Exodus 23:32 through 33 also says, don't make any peace treaty, don't make any covenant with the inhabitants of the land. Listen to it. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. They shall not dwell in thy land, lest they make thee sin against me. For if thou serve their gods, it will surely be a snare unto thee. So don't sign any treaties with them. They shall not dwell in your land. And yet Israel's all the time trying to sign treaties. Now, it's okay to sign treaties as long as you're signing treaties with countries outside of the land. But when you sign a treaty allowing non-Jewish people to stay in the land, you are in direct violation to Almighty God. Well, after the 1967 war and this stupendous victory by the tiny nation of Israel, Israel thought, now the Arabs will make peace with us. They know they can't defeat us. We're the premier power of the Middle East, so they'll make peace with us now. But it didn't happen. The Arab League got together at Khartoum, Sudan, August the 29th through September the 1st. They had a big all-Arab meeting, and there they issued the famous 3 no's. No peace with Israel, no negotiations with Israel, and no recognition of Israel. Well, when the Jews realized there was no peace deal coming, they began to build in Judea. Now remember, when God told them, when I bring you to the land, you are to occupy the land. So the Jews began to build in the West Bank, in the territory they had captured, saying, God must have brought us into our promised land. They don't want a peace deal with us. Therefore, we are going to occupy the land. Then in 1979, Egypt and Israel got together to sign a peace agreement. President Carter of the United States talked with Anwar Sadat of Egypt and with Menachem Begin of Israel, and they got together to make a peace deal. You can see them here as they're concluding the treaty at Camp David here in the United States of America. The other 20 member states of the Arab League were so livid that Egypt had dared to make a peace agreement with Israel that they expelled Egypt from the Arab League. Then, in 1980, Israel took a very dramatic step. Israel annexed East Jerusalem. Now, they've taken this in war, but it didn't belong to anyone. The Palestinians had held it illegally, or pardon me, the Jordanians had held it illegally for 19 years since the War of Independence in 1948. Now Israel takes Jerusalem and now annexes East Jerusalem, putting all of Jerusalem together. They declared Jerusalem to be Israel's eternal, undivided capital. Now, God had said before, way back in the Old Testament, many times, I will put my name in Jerusalem. And I think it's about 37 times in the Old Testament. Now Israel is simply fulfilling what God said. They unified Jerusalem, making Jerusalem the capital. Now, this was a huge step that the United Nations was going to resent bitterly, because they didn't want Israel to have Jerusalem as their capital. Why not, I wonder? I mean, after all other nations, they named their own capital, and now Israel controlled Jerusalem. I mean, I'm talking about all the nations of the world. Every single nation, the United Nations, accepts their capital, except Israel. And they said, oh, now you cannot have Jerusalem. I got a feeling it's because God said, I'll put my name there. And Satan said, oh, really? If that's where you want your name, guess where I want mine. So the battle over Jerusalem began. And there have been 41 wars so far fought over control of Jerusalem. And it's not over. There's at least one more coming. The next war, or at least the final war, is going to be called the Battle of Armageddon. Well, in world affairs, there's a huge shift in 1989. The Berlin Wall fell. The Iron Curtain came down. It was the end of the Cold War, and it was declared by none other than our president at the time, George Herbert Walker Bush, that the New World Order had been born. Well, thinking in these terms, now we're going to have peace. The Iron Curtain's gone. East and West are getting along together. Cold War is over. Let's settle this pesky Middle East problem. It's time to make peace in the Middle East. So in 1991, there was a conference held in Madrid, Spain. It was called the Madrid Peace Conference. Driving forces behind it were President Herbert Walker Bush and his Secretary of State, James Baker. They held the meeting and they coerced Israel to go. Israel did not want to go, but they strong-armed Israel into going. It was attended by Israel and by a Jordanian Palestinian delegation. Also present were the United States and the USSR. Talks continued and then escalated when Yitzhak Rabin was elected the new prime minister of Israel in 1992. Now, as these talks progressed, the subject of Jerusalem inevitably came up, and Israel realized that their ownership of Jerusalem was going to be challenged, even though they've now annexed it, made it their united capital, tore down the separation barrier, the wall, the fence that had separated Jordan from Israel for 19 years. That's all gone. Even though they had done all that, they understood clearly that the nations of the world were going to challenge their right to have Jerusalem as their unified, undivided capital. So the leaders of Israel decided they better take a stand. They got together on May the 19th of 1993, and they signed a document called the Jerusalem Covenant. Now, look at this important quote. And I couldn't give it all to you here, but let me give you a little bit of it. Once again, our feet stand within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem, built as a city joined together, which unites the people of Israel to one another and links heavenly Jerusalem with earthly Jerusalem. From this place, we once again take this vow. Notice it's a vow. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may my right hand lose its strength. May my tongue cleave to my palate. if I do not remember you, if I do not raise up Jerusalem at the very height of my rejoicing. We have been martyred for you. We have yearned for you. We have clung to you. Our faithfulness to you we shall bequeath to our children after us. Forevermore, our home shall be within you. And this document, the Jerusalem Covenant, was signed by the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, by the President of Israel, Ezer Weizmann, by the Mayor of Israel, Teddy Kollek, by the Speaker of the Knesset, Sheva Weiss, and by many other officials of Israel at the time. Israel was taking a stand. This is not negotiable. We will not surrender control of Jerusalem. And by the way, this covenant, it's about a 6-foot-long document on display in the main floor of the Israeli Knesset building to this very moment. They entered into covenant. Why is that so important? Remember what we're talking about today? Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon. Now you see that this battle's been shaping up for 4,000 years, ever since God made that covenant with Abraham. Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon, a tremendous lesson from End Time Ministries. On December the 6th, 2017, President Donald Trump announced the United States was recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and would be moving its embassy to Jerusalem. This immediately set off a firestorm of negative reaction from the UN, from Europe, from the Arab world, and mostly from the Palestinians. Now for the critical questions. Why did he do it? Was this an impulsive action, or was this the result of careful, well thought out calculation? And finally, where will this action lead? In Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon, we'll answer these critical questions and disclose what the prophecies say will ultimately happen. Get your copy of Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon today. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or go to endtime.com.
Have you always wanted to know more about Bible prophecy? Well, now you can. Attend a prophecy conference hosted by End of the Ages' Irvin Baxter. Call 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com/events to see when Irvin will be at a location near you.